Hey, I was going to ask you. So I keep thinking about this because this was saved in my just in my human performance folder. But that game book 3.0 that you wrote, I don't know how long ago. I always say that's like literally one of the best. That's like my top three just general sports performance books. Even like working with more advanced athletes. And when does that still sell? Like, tell me a little bit of the story behind that too. I'm really curious.
Yeah, obviously I'm out of the performance game, kind of like Joe, right? And coaching
Sure.
football as a full-time football coach, but I had a big youth following and youth groups back when I owned a gym, BBA. And I always get people asking for, the various games that we use with our youth, middle school, high school, college, and beyond, what we did. And so actually it was a COVID project, Joel. So,
Oh yeah,
I got
gotcha.
shut down, yeah, being a small business owner, got shut down for whatever it was, 8, 12 weeks back during COVID. And so I had, a big database of games of that. So just during COVID is when I organized everything and tried. If you see some of the videos on like our game book, a lot of it's just my wife and I kind of trying to do the games because it was just us two, trying to do some of those games. But it was a COVID project, and getting a lot of questions. But yeah, it still sells. I probably get at least 1, 2 sales a week, so it's still rocking and rolling. Still might pay for a lunch here and there every once a week. So I'm
Yeah.
not gonna complain about that. Yeah,
Yeah, maybe just a coffee pretty soon with the way things are going. I mean, I would say that
right.
book
Yeah.
for the price was like literally the best deal I think in existence. I
So
uh
if you might watch, it's still out there.
yeah,
I still got it, I think, attached to our Instagram. I don't go on Instagram a ton, but yeah, I think it's still attached there. But yeah, it was a COVID project, Joel, just trying to and then gather everything. And then what we got to use it as is like, for our interns or new groups of interns, we'd use that, we'd give them that book.
yeah.
So they could go through some things and they could spark because they would lead some sessions with youth programs and so they got to see some of that stuff. But yeah, it kind of just was a COVID project.
Yeah. Yeah, and that makes sense because it's so comprehensive. I was thinking like, "Man, when did you have time to put this together?" But I mean, even
COVID, man.
myself yeah, even myself, like, I mean, I use all those ideas, like you said, like, even with older athletes as part of the warm-up, like, just, like, upscaled, like, how upscaled can we make this from a stimulus perspective? But younger athletes, especially, like, particularly those, like, 10, 11, 12, who are kinda being put into a little bit more of that box, that, like, more of that formal, kinda stuffy box. I've had such good experiences with that age group, even just consulting, where I'll give a lot of exercises based out of that game book, and then I'll get feedback from the person working with the young athlete, and they're like, "This athlete's running faster, they're jump," because it was just stimulating for them. Like, it was fun and exciting, and that excitement drove the stimulus, and they cared about those things actually even more than, "Hey, let's just get the timer out again today," or whatever it was, so
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Especially for middle school and elementary school and even high school athletes. Like,
yeah.
for as a coach for them to do some of these activities in these games was much more fun for me as a coach too. If I'm
Yeah,
running,
sure.
8 to 10, 12 hours of sessions a day, I don't need to do another wall acceleration period and
Yeah.
shit like that. So it was much more like the athletes like it. There is a benefit to it, and also as a coach, it makes your life much more enjoyable.
Yeah. I think, yeah, with the games, it was something that for me for the longest time, I did there was that sense of boredom if I mean, I think it was enjoyable to go through the main list, the Olympic list, because there's more skill teaching involved, some of the main blocks. But if you do that right away and then you just ride accessories the rest of the time, I was just sitting there like kind of not twiddling my thumbs, but I would find myself looking at the clock. And then when you switch and you run a lot of more dynamic stuff, it doesn't have to be outright games, but even things that just challenge athletes' movement level on a variety of levels, and it's a way that it's variable. That would always be so much fun, and the athletes would always reciprocate that. You could always tell, and a lot of times my barometer sometimes would be if I'm a little bored, I think the athletes are probably bored. So
Yeah.
awesome, man. Well, hey, so has this been 2 years for you now, full-time football or three? Full-time football?
3 years, just 3 years now. Yep.
Yeah. So before that though, you were always doing like skill stuff, probably more on the maybe smaller group side of things. Like was it
Yes.
a little bit different? Yeah, different element of
Yeah, obviously owned a gym and then again, going back to COVID, they kind of football was a big sport that kind of got shut down during that time period. And that was when really I saw the writing on the wall that I want to get back into football full time in a team setting. Because during COVID, like I would have like 40 athletes, that fall season really got shut down and, had all of our college athletes kind of back. That's, where I spent 10% of my time was where I wanted 90% of my energy and my focus was at. And I was like, yeah, I just got to get back into the team setting. So it was definitely like a smaller group, skill type variety. And then I got, where I was at the University of Dubuque, popped on as just like a volunteer for their team to get engaged with that program and work with, get back in the team setting and coach in that manner. And then we were going to move to lacrosse regardless. My wife got a job up here, so I was ready to just shut down the gym regardless or sell it. And so this opportunity opened up, and now I've been here for 3 years. But yeah, it's like we talked off screen. I love every minute of it. It's been a much needed escape from owning, like we said, the brick and mortar of a gym.
Sure. Do you feel like all those experiences, like with something like that game book 3.0 that has like so many activities in it, and I just think even about working with young athletes and people who have the kind of mind that can just come up with so many ways to be creative and have fun and expansive. I think that is that's such an awesome training format for children. Do you feel that, even though you didn't start off, right away in football, do you feel like that maybe gave you something that you wouldn't have otherwise in terms of if you would have just started in football just straight away and gotten into that? Is that something you ever think
Yeah.
about?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think about a ton, Joe, but like, so 100%, it's got to help. Like, when I was at BBA, I was coaching every make and model of athlete
Mm,
throughout a day from a
yeah,
6, 7-year-old in our youth session, elementary schools, great. And then we're going to adults and then everything in between from uh, kids that would never play varsity in high school to professional athletes. And so I think getting to work with that large variety of athletes from various backgrounds and having different goals, I think definitely made me 100% a better coach than if I would have just been a college football coach from day one. So yeah, like I said, I'm super thankful for that experience. And it just got me to where I am at. I got to see for a stretch there of 7, 8 years. I love strength conditioning and I love the performance aspect of working with athletes and trying to get them to enhance their sport. But I saw also that like there's an end limit to that from what my capacity. And I didn't like that. That's why I kind of got out of it because like you work with an athlete for a certain amount of time, and then you hand them over to the school or the sport coach or the team, and that's where the meat and potatoes are at. And so
yeah,
I was never comfortable with that. Like if I want someone that's going to affect performance, and that's kind of really what I want to do, like you got to be involved with the team. And so, yeah, I think it definitely helped where I'm at now. All the experiences and all the vast variety of athletes I worked with, to get to where I am at now. I think made me a more rounded and better coach.
sure. Yeah, for sure. I know for me, uh, nowadays in person, I'm back to being more track and field. Still do more general sessions as well, but I think that the 8 years I spent in the general world, it's almost like to keep myself engaged. I always wanted to find ways I could slice things deeper or find ways to have more fun or make things more stimulating. And that frame of mind definitely impacted my track practices
Yeah.
after. It's almost like I wish I had the before track practices and the after. It's like 8 years, the 2012, the 2011 ones, and then fast forward and then the 2022s and 23s. And it's like you get that little chunk in the middle, and there's definitely a lot of lateral thinking opportunities for sure. And so
Yeah, that's no different than like my journey to football. Like you said, Joe, like if I would have hopped right into football at 2012 when I ended playing, I would have not been viewing the game of football and how to practice and how to develop athletes the same way as I do now. And that's part of the reason wanting to get back into football. And I think all sports are like this, and football gets maybe a somewhat unfair bad rap, but like there are a lot of bad practices in the game of football. A lot of I think outdated and poor ways to develop and prepare football athletes for sport. And so that's one of the reasons too. Like I was having a lot of success in the smaller group, individual type of setting. In little old Dubuque, Iowa, getting year in and year out guys on NFL rosters, and guys performing really well at the college level. That I saw a gap in how practices were designed and were organized, and how athletes were being obviously trained and whatnot. And so, without that 8 years of like being away from the game of football, I wouldn't have been in that same lens. Just as you're talking about, like if I would have organized a practice in 2012 compared to now, without that experience, that's that time away from football is what allowed me to see football from a different lens and different landscape, and I think that's helped me a ton.
Yeah. And like you've said on this show too, like everyone should work with youth sports and pros, and you see where people came from and then where they end up. And I think that the more people we can work with too from those ends of the spectrum. For me, it's been more youth sports lately, which has been amazing, and seeing like those beginning grounds of those things and movement patterns. But yeah, I'm really excited to speak a little bit more today on where you're at now, especially in light of, I know you gave a talk at, I think, Sean Mishka's or the movement conference on artistry, fostering artistry. And the first thing I thought of was actually something that came out of track. It was Kibwe Johnson, who is a throws coach and threw the hammer, one of the better hammer throwers in American history. And he had talked about basically coaching is oftentimes given in a way that can really push down artistry. There's very little encouragement of freedom or movement. And I think a lot of the principles we'll be talking about, certainly, the game of football, but I think a lot of it's universal as well. I mean, if you're whatever sport you're coaching, or I hope to make some inroads to if people are doing more general agility or what that can and can't do. How much of an artist can you be in tag? I mean, I do think you could be a pretty good artist in tag if it's just a general warm up for your. And I've actually been experimenting with some different things with that, like constraints and ways to approach it. But I'd love to get into when you're running the individual sessions for your groups. How do you view? What are some first principles when it comes to helping those players to be an artist and giving them room to explore, yes, the needs of the game and the tactics, but also what makes them unique as a player? And as I mentioned, helping them to become an artist of movement.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. I mean, what you kind of touched upon there was, is at the Sport Movement School conference with Sean Miska and Tyler European Emergence
Yeah.
was kind of I guess I call it my football manifesto. And so I broke down what a typical and average football practice looks like across the country and what underneath like an ecological dynamics lens looks like. And one of the periods that is really usually typically poorly run in football is what they call indie, like an individual period. So you go with your position coach and you have whatever, a 10, 20-minute block where everyone, the goal really is to make, say you have 10 athletes, to kind of reduce the bandwidth of those 10 athletes and make them look the same. So whether it be their stance, their start, their footwork, whatever other buzzword they want to work about, you're trying to make all the athletes' techniques and fundamentals and movements look a lot more similar. And that's kind of the opposite of what I believe. And that's, like, I feel that individual period, and all sports have these variations of individual where they're trying to drill down and nail down a technique. And obviously different sports, there's more or less bandwidth that they're allowed freedom with that. Like swimming, there's certain, obviously the stroke that you're swimming, there's obviously limited bandwidth. But in team sports especially, like the people that are successful at every level look vastly different. And so how I look at this, and because I believe that a constraints-led approach and ecological dynamics is, for me, I think the best method of coaching. Like, I believe you dive all into that. And so instead of calling indie, I believe language matters. Like I'd call it like an artistic opportunity. And so as you kind of saw in some of those slides, Joe, like I think it's an opportunity for each player to be able to have an opportunity to put their own stamp on the craft, because whatever position you play, it is a craft and there's an art to it. And I want athletes to have an ability to put their own stamp on that. And so instead of trying to make everyone look the same and move the same and have the exact same stance and start, I actually want to try to make them be as unique as possible. So I push them to move differently. I push them to get outside of their comfort zone. I allow them opportunities to encourage and adapt and try to create their own signature and style. So if you think about the best athletes, everyone's like favorite athletes, they probably had something unique about them. They, whether they had a name or a trademark for their, like, whatever their move was, but like there's authenticity to that. And that's kind of what I want. And so actually during that clinic, Joel, I talked about, played a clip of J.J. Watt. So another Wisconsin boy, but J.J. Watt talked about, like, he would study and look at the offensive lineman. So obviously J.J. Watt's going to be a Hall of Famer defensive lineman, but he watched how they practiced and how they would try to get to a certain spot, and they had a timing and rhythm of like, hey, this is what the D-line is going to do. So we're going to practice in this very closed way that they would have a certain amount of steps and a certain amount of punch. And he'd say, like, I'd watch it and say, I'm going to just disrupt that. He's like, sometimes I would just stand straight up. I'd go against everything that every defensive line coach would ever say, but I would just go against that because I wanted to try to disrupt and make the offensive lineman uncomfortable. And he said, like, they would just panic. Like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be coming at me. So I get my 3 clean steps in and I can punch you. Like, so I think it's an opportunity to try to build, let athletes to have the time and the place and the freedom and the safety to create their own signature or style, to have opportunities for them to interact authentically with the problems that they need to solve during the sport, and not like butt in and say, though, this is the only way that you're allowed to do this. And like I said, the big thing for me was, like, I try to express to my athletes coaching defense and defensive backs is, like, try to tell, like, this is what an offensive receiver is trying to do to you guys. So trying to see things from the other side. I'll have them play receiver. So when they are taking a rep, they get to see from the vantage point of a receiver. So what did this change in leverage or change in tempo or this change in whatever you did there, how did it affect the receiver's perception? How they were going to organize their steps and their footwork, the timing of their routes. So that's why I like Indy, because I'll have my guys play receiver quite a bit. And for my individual periods, it's never like on air. It's always with a partner. And because in my sport, you're always going against somebody else. Yeah. And so you have to be perceiving them. So I like that they get to play receiver because you get to see things from the other side. And so I guess overall in general, there, Joel, would be like, I see India as like as a petri dish for giving my players an opportunity to create their own canvas, create their own art, be their own artist, and have their own style, because everyone's going to be a little bit different. And I want them to have that chance and that opportunity rather than me constricting and restricting what they're capable of.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Hammer Strength. Hammer Strength machines are designed with athlete and human biomechanics in mind. They use arcs of motion and leverage to deliver a powerful strength stimulus with little noise and maximal efficiency. When it comes to strength machines for athletic performance, Hammer Strength leads the way. Yeah. It makes me think about basketball. I say American because I just think about, I have like football. I always have to say American football.
Yeah.
Or, European football. But basketball, and I think about, like, Tony Villani had talked about when you're playing defense, there's elements of basketball that just come innately when you play basketball, like spacing and zone and things like that. And I think Bobby White had reciprocated some ideas that things you just learn and just innately playing basketball can transfer to general principles of playing defense. But more so I was thinking, well, okay, basketball, you're always flipping. You're always either on offense or defense. So you always have that perspective. And basketball is a sport that artistry is kind of almost more innate in some ways. I think it could easily not be, very easily. And especially too, I like and appreciate how a lot of the greats are like LeBron's. Like, I didn't have a skills trainer, and you just get out and you play and you explore and you try new moves, and you're always playing both sides of the ball. And I would think too, the idea of even trying to play as many positions as you can, as long as you feasibly can, like even beyond offense and defense. Hey, this is what it's like to be the center. This is what it's like to be the point guard. I know what it's like to be that. And the more you can move around and understand those things, it just makes good sense. And so it seems, from my understanding, I never played football, but it could be a sport. Some people, I've heard it described as basically like more like chess than other sports. It could very easily be, hey, you're here, do this thing, you go here. How And of course, there's those tactics. I mean, I've played Madden. I know the little X's and the lines. So how do you encourage freedom and freedom of expression within those tactics?
Yeah, so obviously, like football is a different sport in that manner, in that every single play, a coach on either side of the ball. And so for me on defense, being a defense coordinator, like I put a play call in that our guys essentially run. And so I have, as a coach, I have a pretty visible stamp on the game, and that's different than a lot of sports. Although I think a lot of sports, I think if you peel back the layers, coaches do have a pretty visible stamp. Like even in soccer and basketball, they're more free flowing. But like again, Yuri Verkhoshansky said that sport is a problem solving activity, and same for coaches. Like that's all the game is for us, is trying to problem solve what the opponent is trying to do and trying to attack us. But going back to that question, Joe, would be like I give a lot more freedom, and that's now been granted and given to me. There's much more restriction when I first got here, but now seeing like some of the progression and success that some of my players, specifically the defensive backs, have had, are like the head coach is now just they can, like when I first got here, this was the technique that everyone needed to use. All the like this is how we do it, and so I've gotten away from that a lot and allowing players to play in their own manner. So despite having some sort of call, there is a lot of room for alignment, a lot of room for different leverages, a lot of room for changing and varying up your tempos, for playing soft versus press, for disguising. There's a lot of different opportunities for athletes to, like I said, put their own unique stamp within the scheme. And obviously, if they're going to play some sort of, say, simplistic terms like playing man coverage, they have to card a certain guy man to man. They're going to have to do some things, whether it be pre-snap and post-snap, to put themselves in the best position to cover a man-to-man. But like, there's various ways to do those things. And so I let my guys, I try to give as much as possible, encourage them to find different ways to do that. Can you play this call despite this leverage or this alignment or being this close or this far? Like, so I actually like try to push them to hey, I know you have to get to this landmark, but let's try this alignment pre-snap and see, just tell me what happens and see what, observe how it affects the offense or your ability to get to that position. So I think encouraging athletes to try to expand how they can play each call goes a long ways, because football isn't like it, as much as we want to think that each call we have a perfectly game plan. The reality is like football is chaotic and a lot of things don't go to plan. And so you make bad calls come in late, players are out of position. They have to be able to adapt and adjust live and in the moment to those moments. And so I try to practice that as much as possible.
Sure. You have me thinking about like how do you funnel that exploration, in the sense that I think critics of the constraints-led approach will often say, "Oh, they just it's a free for all." Like, and I have a funny example of that with basketball, actually, because when I was my JV coach was not like this. He was a lot more, if you had like that dial of how much freedom and exploration you get, he was a lot more tight with the plays. But then my varsity coach was really loose. It was just like he had plays that were extremely open-ended. But the funny thing is they almost always fell into the point guard just trying to juke some guy and then just throwing it to the shooting guard at the last second. Like, it always ended up in that. Not always, but a lot of times when it was so loose, that's more what it ended up in. And so I would think, okay, what would be some creative ways to explore some more options in that? I'm not trying to make this show like totally like tactics and techniques, but I think these are universal. I think even too, I mean, these I think could be, even if you're just doing like basic one-on-one or 2v2 agility, to put constraints out and just make people move differently and explore those options. I think that's certainly there too. And it could probably be tailored to if you're observing someone who moves in a game a certain way, perhaps, and they always have just like one move or one thing to be able to open up or help them to open up. I'm sure those options exist from the general perspective if you're looking for it, and to know what to look for as well. I would imagine if you went back to, if you were being just running like a speed, if you're just like a speed and agility SAQ, you're an SAQ coach, you would know how to watch people play, and even from a general perspective have ideas on how to help them explore movement. And that's what I'm interested in my own work. But yeah, tell me a little bit about that dial of, okay, here's the play, do this thing, versus you can choose. Maybe can you give me some examples of how that might flow in some of your practices?
Yeah, and so, like, obviously, that would extend into some more we call it crossover, team settings where the scheme is involved, so you're running an actual play. So whether it be 7-on-7 or full 11-on-11, of again, I'll have different intentions going into practice, and so one intention might early on, especially for older guys, they're gonna be more natural with it. Like, we're gonna disguise, and so disguising a coverage, and so whether you're supposed to be pressed or off, or you're supposed to get to this certain landmark depending on the call, I want you guys to disguise the coverage pre-snap as
Mm,
much as possible or as creative as possible. And so, obviously, you have to then understand and allow that there's going to be failures in practice. And so, I understand that and I'm okay with that. And the players know that as well. So, like I said, it's got to be like a safe space for players to understand that I can fail, and that's part of the process to learn
mm,
kind of my guardrails of where I can whether it be just in this case disguise and where I can get to disguise wise and still be able to get to where I'm supposed to be schematically. And so I think that's a big part of it is you got to be okay with athletes making mistakes and failing during practice, which most coaches are not,
sure.
right? They're typically don't allow that. So I encourage mistakes. I want mistakes to happen as much as possible. I think that's where learning occurs is during mistakes. And so that's one way is just having a safe space and nudging athletes to do those type of things and giving intentions like during practice. So like our guys will have
Mhm.
pre-practice intentions. I want this is to be your intention
Yeah.
to this practice. Other ones might be I want you to change something post snap. So it's whether it be a leverage or a tempo. I want this to change post snap. And so I mean again, how those athletes do that, some explore a lot more, some uh, don't explore quite as
Yeah.
much. And so trying to constantly nudge those things for them. And then with football, because it is like practice a lot is scripted. And so it's like the offense has this play, we're running this play. So we know as coaches what plays are happening. And again, I think that should be scaled down a lot compared to what it typically is. Like right now, I'd say majority of football practice, 95 to 100% of plays in practice are scripted. So the offense and defense or coordinators know exactly what's going to call. They look down, they call it. So there's no practice for the coaches as well. But one nice thing about that is I work really closely with our OC and our offensive coaches and say, I want to see this concept or this play versus this call. And so, as you talked about, like obviously being with our athletes day in and day out, you kind of know what their strengths and weaknesses are. As you said, Joel, that they might have uh, um, their go-to technique or strategy or move, right? Like what's the saying? Everyone has a hammer. They see the whole world as a nail, right?
Yeah.
So if they have that one, like I know exactly, uh, uh, being that I coach them, I know what they are going to go to. I know what they're revert to when it's whether it be stress, pressure, chaos. They're going to go back to this because that's what they're comfortable with. This is their go-to move, and so
Mm,
I can work with the offense to script some plays, and then I can obviously do schematically some things that put our athletes in bad positions. So that tool that they want to use isn't going to be the most optimal, and so they have to then organize, self-organize, and
mm.
find a new solution, um, or they're going to get beat. And so those are some nice things that I'm able to do within our practices to try to hopefully expand some of the toolbox that our players have.
That makes sense. So I like that. It's almost, I mean, in some sense, like a lot of coaches would always be looking, okay, here's the offensive, okay, set, here's the perfect defense for that. But in a way, it's like, here's the not perfect defense. We called the wrong call almost. Now you have to figure out how to fix this type. I mean, would that be, that's just how my mind processes a potential setup to force people to problem solve on their feet more. I mean, I don't know if I'm on with that line of thinking, but
Joe,
it's an,
you're 100% on, and
yeah,
you're 100% right that most coaches are in the first manner. Like they're going to try to
yeah,
structure practice where it's perfect. Well, this is our call, and we're making this call. So, like again, whether it be an offense or defense coordinator or whatever sport, basketball, you talk about basketball too, Joe. Like we're going to have this set play, and here's how the opponent is going to play defense, and it's going to work out magically, right? We're going to set this screen
mhm,
back
yeah,
pick, and it's going to end up in the layup. And then inevitably that doesn't happen, correct? Right? That's like
Yeah.
because
Oh,
you're going against
100%.
other human beings that adapt and adjust, and like, and so that's how I structure practice in the manner that I want to give us the worst possible look, so our guys are comfortable in those situations scenarios. Because the reality is, I think I'm usually pretty prepared, but I'm going to make bad calls and put guys in bad positions. And the offense, again, because there's good coaches all across the country that we go against, like they're going to make some really nice calls that are going to stress us. And like, oh, we didn't see that on film. We didn't prepare for some of this stuff, like specifically because they changed the route concept or like, so like the game is never plays out how we think it's going to, cleanly play out in our minds. So why not prepare for that? And so just as you said, Joe, I want as much as possible. Now, there's times that we need to build confidence, and I want our guys to have confidence in certain practices and certain periods in practice. But the large chunk is let's call this defense versus this offense because that call from offense really stresses this defense. So let's see how our guys respond to this situation, how they adapt and adjust, and see if they can solve that problem on the fly. And then it's a great opportunity to watch film on that and for our guys to experience that play, and so they're much more comfortable in those moments, and they're going to find themselves in the game.
Yeah. It makes me think about, I mean, I think I struggled with just playing basketball. And I think I like the basketball example because I think it could be easily scaled down to 3-on-3 and then 2-on-2 games and smaller things that could be done in any setting. But I remember, speaking of like being on a disadvantage, we always did this drill like every day for practice, but I liked it. I had more fun with this drill than almost every like time we set up the plays. I was just gone, but at that point, but it was always just like a 3-on-2, 2-on-1, where like three guys are against two running down the court. Whoever gets the rebound and one other guy, then they're going back and it's two guys
Yeah.
against one guy.
I can't remember. We did
And
that in high school too, and yeah, that was one of my favorites. You could just stay. If you got the rebound, you could just stay in there for as long as you could. Yeah, that was one of my favorites too.
yeah, because it's always a little variation, right? It's always kind of the same thing, but you're always at a disadvantage on defense. But there's a lot of options. It's very simple, but there's always going to be an advantage, a disadvantage, and options. And I just like the simplicity of that. But it makes me think about just the value of even like just 3-on-2s. Like if it's just general agility games, like with a ball or a tag based or whatever it is, like where it gives people some freedom on offense to create, but then defense, it's like you have a disadvantage and maybe there's variation, and
Yeah,
versus, and I think that maybe that's just the cool thing to play with contact prep or more agility based stuff. It's really simple, but you can always play with advantage and disadvantage in space. Um, versus like, and it's never going to be perfect too. That's almost like when you do those more general games, I think it's almost always like that. And it's probably very
yeah,
quick to lose as soon as it becomes like more tactical, and a lot of guys and a lot of setups. I mean, I don't even know where to start with 11-on-11, but
yeah. That's
I
just
hope
like
you.
you said. You're just scaling the complexity and intensity of a lot of those things by manipulating space or time and number of opponents. And yeah, obviously, like you said, Joe, if you reduce the amount of people, and you give maybe some more space or more time, then the creative actions are going to naturally occur to solve whatever problem it
Yeah,
is. And it's like you said, like, and it's a much more, like you said, safer environment. Anytime you go for like football, so 7-on-7 is called skelly, and then obviously like team or 11-on-11, like anytime you do that, it's going to just the natural nature of that because of all through high school and then college, like it becomes a little bit more serious, if you would, and so athletes generally are afraid of making mistakes and exploring and creating. So some of those smaller, and we do that a lot. We call it crossover periods. So like this is where like all the defensive backs would go with all the offensive skill guys, and we do a variety of different activities from one-on-one situations to, like I said, 3-on-2, 2-on-3, 3-on-3, etc. Like small sided type games where the intent is to have our athletes solve various movement problems. Some are specific, some are more general in nature, and so yeah, I think that's how you build a robust athlete, and so when they find themselves in weird, awkward positions in a game, and they somehow get out of situations or make a play, you're like, oh, okay, that they see that.
tell me a little bit about fostering creativity in a one-on-one. And I asked this just because, yeah, you have the indie periods. I've been thinking about this a lot in the sense of maybe more of a general perspective. Like, spending time with like Rafe Kelly and Evolve Move Play and Aaron Cantor, who was a guest on this podcast, in the world of movement, there's this thing called movement improv, which I still don't understand and fully,
Yeah.
but it's almost like a open-ended physical contact where you're not trying to win and lose. And where I've kind of taken that and in talking with like Rafe and Aaron, but like if I was even just playing, like if I was playing one-on-one with someone for fun, after spending time with them, I would be much more liable to spend more time just having fun with movement versus always just trying to beat the person I'm playing, which would have been the old. I mean, we still like had fun doing moves and stuff like that. But nowadays, I've always done like contact games before a lot of practices. We just do like push hands or like one that I like is you're standing about 2 feet apart from your partner. You both put your right hand out. You contact right hands. And you're trying to, it's like a one-handed push hands, but there's like a manipulation of your hand. You can move your
Yep.
hand up or down or whatever, trying to find leverage in a different way. But I find it interesting to think about. It's almost like you can get someone's signature with that a little bit. Like some people just try to, it's like you scan for like a few seconds and then force it, force the push. Like it's,
Yep.
and versus people who are a little more sneaky, like they take their time and they're trying to like really read you out and maybe they're more like water. They're kind of trying to, versus being just more output driven. And where I'm so much wired for the former, I think that also filtered into how I played basketball. It was always just a very one-on-one, can I overpower you to the hoop? I didn't enjoy like the misdirection or like my son, even he's 7 now. He's so mischievous in like even sport. Like if he tricks you in a sport, he laughs. Like I'm like, oh man, I wish I had more of this, like that kind of thing. So yeah, with your indie and one-on-ones, I would be curious, like strategy wise, like the signature of an athlete and what their go-to is to get a point or things like that. How do you view the exploration of I guess I would just call it skill. Like there's like tactics and technique. I don't want to get too muddied with it, but how do you explore their library of abilities in those like one-on-one, very early practice periods?
Yeah, I guess a simple way is I think this has been repeated by a lot of coaches, for a long time is like I will make sure that I tell them you can't repeat the same whatever you want to call it technique or strategy more than once. So if we're doing some sort of one-on-one type of activity, um, I tell them you can't use the same technique or strategy multiple times. And so that forces them. So for like, again, defensive back wise, that could be like a tight coverage versus off versus inside versus outside leverage. Yeah, and then, so I'll do that. That's in a simple way. Just you can't repeat the same solution more than once. You got to, each repetition, you have to change something up. And that can, again, those guys have the freedom then to vary it up, whether it be stance, how wide their feet are, how close they are, if they're staggered, how far off the receiver they are, what kind of leverage they're playing with. And then from like, if I really want to push that would be, especially one-on-one situations, I'll tell them what to do. And so let's say, like, for a pretty simple one here, Joe, is we do quite a bit. We call it release drill because we're a press coverage team. And so all we do is we get a receiver lined up and a defensive back lined up, just like you might see out on the perimeter with a corner, like a defensive back pressed up, and the receiver just does a release. He tries to get like 10 yards down the field, like on a vertical stem, and tries to stack the defensive back. Pretty basic, pretty simple drill. And so what I'll do is each repetition, I'll tell the next defensive back up what he needs to do. So I'll tell him, you guys turn backwards. When I say go, you flip. And then the receiver goes and he flips. You got to start in 1 foot. You're going to start 2 yards off. You're going to start with your eyes closed. You can't use your hands this time. I want your feet more narrow. I want you can't retreat, so you can't back up. I tell those guys, hey, imagine whoever your favorite player is, your defensive back. Imagine you're him. How would he do this rep? And so there's a bunch of ways to try to just tap into that creative process. My favorite one, again, is just putting the ball in their court and saying no rep can be the same. And so every time they come back up, because they might get in a 5-minute period, 8 to 10 of these repetitions, no rep can be the same. And so I also like to see how they vary it up. And if it's not to my liking as a coach, and that's like you said earlier, Joe, like a lot of times coaches hear self-organization or the constraints of their approach, and it's just like, we let the players just do whatever the hell they want. And like there's coaching, it's nudging and guiding, but it's always allowing athletes to perceive a rich environment. But there's nudging and guiding and trying to support and facilitate athletes to have a more rich search and be more creative in their movement solutions. But My go-to is just say, no two reps can be the same. If they're not getting as adaptive or creative as I'd like, then I will start to step in and say, I want this next rep, try this next rep. And so that, in a simple one-on-one manner, that's an easy way that, like you said, Joe, for general or specific, that's an easy way that any coach right now, tomorrow, could implement whatever it may be. And I think we've seen this, like, whether it be some of the simplest linear excels or sprints, just change how the starting position each and every single repetition. That's an easy thing and that builds a more adaptable athlete, allows the athlete to experience a much more wide range of potential movement solutions of how they solve those problems. And so that's an easy one for all coaches that they can implement right away. And like for basketball, I can't remember now. It's going to drive me nuts because there's a guy on Instagram I just started following. He does he kind of uses this for his basketball players specifically, like shoot. He works with a lot of great shooters, but like just shooting, like I gotta have a flat arc to a high arc. You're on one foot. You're gonna step to your left. You're gonna turn around and locate the rim and shoot. Like he does really a lot of cool things with that. So instead of just catching like on the shooting gun and you're at the right wing and you take 25 shots, I think we know that like that doesn't build robust shooters. Like every sport, there's a ways to just make every single rep different and challenge your athletes to explore different ways to solve each repetition. I think that is a nice, easy starting point for a lot of coaches.
Yeah. It's interesting how when you see elite athletes who do what you mentioned so well, I feel especially in basketball, like I remember when I was at Cal, every now and then in the middle of the day when there wasn't teams in, I would play 21 with Laisha Clarendon. She was like a WNBA All-Star. And I had the height advantage, obviously, but like she was such a good ball handler. Like I would think I'd figured out her move, and then she knew that I thought I had figured it out, like subconsciously or whatever. And then she'd do a different move, and I was just like, oh, like I got burned again. And eventually, I just got to the point where I'm like, I can't predict what you're gonna do. I haven't played enough high level basketball to even come close, anyways, or study your library or played you enough. So I just had to I basically just had to kind of feel what her rhythm was. I had to almost retreat to like an auditory and a rhythmic based defense. Like that's my only chance. I can't even try to figure out what you're going to do with the ball. So I just have to kind of match your rhythm. And that's my that's my only hope. But I was playing with her. I really experienced what it was like to have somebody who every rep, repetition without every repetition or every rep different. I will say, I'm sorry, I've gone to every rep different I think the athletes understand it better without having
Yeah,
to bust
yeah,
out the
absolutely, yeah,
Bernstein and all
absolutely.
that. I mean, I have both written down in my programming, but every rep different is starting to take it over a little bit. But I love what you said. Well, especially too, like even, sometimes players need to be guided in terms of what to do. But I love that you also put the visual in there because I was thinking about, and this is just something that's been more on my radar. I've prescribed way more visualizations and analogies, especially even in the last year. Like it's part of the pre-practice like script, and here's some visualizations that go with this part of your event, and it's really powerful. And I always remember when I was in high school too, like for team sport, thinking about one day my coach is like, "Hey, Joel, you pretend like you're the best player on the other team. We're going to play this, team with the player of the year, conference player of the year," and I just pretended I was him. And I basically had a free license to shoot every shot. And I made literally every shot. And the best thing, the most satisfying part of that day is our point guard, I think he was our shooting guard. That guy, I'd love to say I had a great relationship with all my teammates, but that guy annoyed me and he was guarding me and I just was draining everything in his face. I'm like, this is literally the best day of my life. Like, this is so good. But it was because the coach gave me permission to be that guy,
Yeah,
and it was almost like a little identity shift. But honestly, it's like I had a great day that day and then that was it. Like there was never, my coach never came back to me and said, "Hey, you remember that day you were on fire and couldn't miss?" Like, and there was never like, why didn't we ever come back to that? And I get it too. There's like some novelty that comes with some of that stuff. You aren't expecting it, like if you're expecting, oh yeah, like last time I was so good and now sometimes you have that little crossfiring that doesn't work so well. But at the same time, that was really powerful for me. And I can only see how, that imagery, like so often we just coach based on, do this thing or whatever it is, not be this person. I think back in the day, everyone say Kobe when they shot, Kobe or whatever, like basketball. Like no one really coaches based off be this person. I think there's so much there that we don't that we don't often look for.
Yeah. I mean, something like, a cue I've used is like, if you couldn't fail, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you do this repetition? Like,
Mm,
obviously that's been, said before, but like, yeah, give your athletes the keys and give them confidence. I think is the next, I don't know, not frontier, but like that's the psychology of coaching and how
yes.
you communicate and give feedback and I'm poor with that. It's an area that I'm trying to work on a ton is that. And I think that is a hidden
Yes.
gem or just an area that could be have massive impact on your players. Like you said, Joe, just like that, you're the best player. You just go, yeah, just that
Yes.
when athletes seem to have freedom to do those things, they don't feel like the stress and pressure of making a mistake that they're going to be pulled or they're going to get bitched at. Like
Yeah.
that freedom, that's like, yeah, is when athletes perform at their best. So how can we do that? Like you said, in an authentic and organic environment, because it like sometimes, like you said, if you keep doing that, it's going to wear thin. My track, this is for me back. I'm going back to track, Joel, but our high school track coach, Mark Moss, and I was not a fast guy. But every like big meet, and I knew it was coming. And like my state track meet, my senior year, it didn't fucking matter. But like anytime I would do my run throughs during, the run throughs, he goes, "Man, you look fast, Michael. You look fast today."
Oh
And
yeah.
that's like because I'm always self conscious, like I wasn't the fastest guy, but he's like, "You
Name.
look like you look fucking fast," and that always just gave me so much confidence. Like when I hear that from Monster, I'm like, all right, okay, today's gonna be a good day. We're gonna throw a bomb out there, but just those things, and I need to be better at that. And I'm trying to figure out, ways to do that. And like I said, an authentic. And he was just authentic and organic about it. It's not like he wrote it down like I'm gonna tell every jumper that they look fast on the runway, but like he was just, it just was natural for him to say that. And there was just, it just like you said, like, it just made me know I'm gonna have a big day. And so I think there's a lot in that area, in that realm of coaching that I need to get better at. And I think a lot of coaches probably could as well.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, right on. I had a coach like that too. Speaking of track and long jump, he was Coach Scott, my assistant. Yeah, he was the assistant coach at the college I competed at, and he knew like the mind like so well. And it was funny because long or triple jump, if you fouled like a jump, he would be there at the side being like if you jumped and it was a foul, it was like 21 feet or something. He would tell you it was 24 or something like
Yeah, I know.
that. But the
That
funny
was a
thing is,
bomb. Yeah.
you knew you knew he was like, BS, a little bit like he obviously we all knew it wasn't 24 feet, but he was so committed to you and your success. Like
Yep.
I couldn't tell an athlete that, but he could because he
Yeah.
was so good at that. And I a seminar, I was just doing the Elastic Essentials Level 2 seminar this past weekend, and I was talking. I've kind of come up with this quadrant, and I think all systems are imperfect of categorization. But I think about the different skills and strengths we have as coaches, and I think one is stimulus, like the ability to put fire out in the program, and then another is structured work and data collection, and another is skill and skill acquisition, and then the other is spirit. And that's one of my things that I've had to work hard on is that spirit, or I liken it to like water. It's like all those things that are complex in between the cracks and that are authentically you. And man, I tell you, I have to work very hard. It's not my natural, and it's not my natural ability. And it's also something that I think it almost takes work on myself too. I don't say almost, it does to help myself come across in a way that just thinking about those coaches who I've had who are so good at that and can get that out of you in a really authentic way, like you were saying with your coach. So yeah,
Yeah.
same here. I'm working on that one.
I know. So, and that's, yeah, like you said, it's got to be organic and authentic. And, my track coach, like, it was never a day that I felt bad. So maybe I was flying down the runway, but,
Yeah, maybe.
it was never like, he was never disingenuine where I felt slow and he's like, "Oh, you look," like you said, because sometimes you can see through that stuff. But it was always like, "Oh, I felt good on that run through," and he'd just be there and like, how did he catch those moments? And he was so good and natural with that. And so, yeah, like you said, that's a cool quadrant there, the spirit. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking too, those coaches are so good because they don't say the same thing every time either. It's like they know the
no,
right time to say it. Like my Coach Scott one day, I remember it was I forget what meet it was. He just was like, "Oh, you're so bouncy. You look so bouncy warming up today." But again, in a way that, I just believed. I was like, "Yeah, I do have
Yeah.
springs in my feet today." Like it's that type of thing. So yeah, just that fostering of belief. I love what you were doing with the different positions and just making somebody do something a little different. That's something that I enjoy even doing, even something as remedial, like it is air, like on air, but even just if you throw a tennis ball and chase it. I know you have a lot of stuff like that in the games book, but you could throw a tennis ball and chase it. You can throw a tennis ball and do a 360 spin and chase it. You could just different. I really, the older I've gotten and the more basically gaps I saw in myself as a team sport player. It was funny. The other day I was doing something like I could do dunks pretty well in high school. Like I could do a windmill at 6'1" and stuff like that. But if you asked me to jump over like a chair or a person, like I would just freeze. I mean, I could not display an ounce of my ability. It was just so bad. And even the other day, so I was I would throw a tennis ball and I would just put like a little hurdle in the way. I mean, it's not even high. It's not a track hurdle. Like it's not like a plastic thing that I'm going to face plant in the street. It's like a little dog agility hurdle.
Yep.
And even the fact that that's there, like I can't throw it right. And I'm like, what is going on? But it's good for me because it allows me to sit with that thing and kind of work my way through it without anybody there. But with people, I just think it's so many possibilities to set people up to have to problem solve in all those different ways. And I'm sure you learn a lot about the players. Like, hey, you have a hard time recovering out of this position. And I guess in so many ways, the best way is just to recognize that and experience it and be okay with failing out of those positions. I think I would have really benefited from those elements in practice because it was never like it was never. All I ever did was get yelled at when I made a mistake in practice, and I guess that is like the environment that you create, right? Like you
Yeah.
can. I think it's so, like you said, it's so much more common. Like the status quo is you made a mistake, you get yelled at. And I think probably should sometimes, sometimes, but what's the overarching aspect? What's the overarching goal of this from a learning perspective? As you talk more, that's what actually killed me as an athlete is that it was never really presented like that for me ever. And maybe that's why track was the thing that was so easy because it's just you in the bar, you in the
Yep.
hurdles, you in the javelin, and you could just go out by yourself and just try a bunch of different ways and it's always fun. But then you get there with the other players and it's always perfect and it's just so easy to get frustrated and that's why and then there's so much room for when the creativity is brought in and the freedom to do that. I think that's what can make it really special. And it's sad to think of how many people do miss out on that, especially younger athletes too. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's
I'm with you. And that's, as a player, as a football player, I was afforded that. And like sometimes it's, like you said, what your basketball coach said to you. I was a pretty good player, so I had a lot more longer leash than a lot of other players. And so I had opportunities to go off script and create and do some things that other players weren't allowed. But like, did I become the player I was because of that? I mean, like if we gave more players that opportunity, that freedom, hey, you to not be afraid of taking or trying different shots, like in basketball, or for me, like different ways to run a route. Like, it's kind of the chicken before the egg. Like good players have longer leashes. Therefore, they probably further build that gap between everybody else because they're allowed to make mistakes and they're allowed to experiment and try new things. Like, why don't we allow everyone to do that? And maybe that will bring not only the whole group, but like it brings your your twos, your threes, further up. But it's only the best player that's allowed to, try this crazy thing, not work, and then move on. Like, oh, hey, you tried something crazy,
Mhm.
but sometimes it does work, and they further extend themselves from everybody else because they're allowed that freedom and flexibility. So I just think that's an environment that I want all my athletes to feel comfortable in. That is, especially during practice. That's what practice is for. I feel like practice is an experiment. It is to try new things and to fail and to learn. Like, and so as you talked about, like what, 1-on-1s, 2-on-2s, three, all those small things, like I try to tell those guys all the time, it's not about winning. Like there's no winning or losing. There's only learning. And it's not to it's not to prove yourself for somebody else. It's or to beat an opponent. It's like what does this repetition? What does this environment 1v1, 2v2, 3v3? What does it offer you to test as a growth, a challenge of adapting and trying new things? So that's how I view it. I think our players, it takes some time for them to obviously understand that, and like because they've been beaten to their head if they're incoming
Yeah.
freshmen all through high school, that this is how every activity and drill is got to look like. And you got to do it with perfect technique and exactly how I say as a coach. But I think our upperclassmen, and that's where I've gotten more freedom and leash from our head coach, is that he's seen our guys like it progress and that stuff transfer to the field. And the development of a lot of our players. And so it takes time, but I think, yeah, you have to build that environment and atmosphere within your coaching and your group.
Yeah. I really like the example there of having the longer leash, because I think those of us who have been around sports long enough, you see those players who are that good
Yeah.
and they're given that, that freedom. And it's funny. I even see it. And I think 5-on-5 basketball for second graders is just a bad idea. We talked about that before we pushed
Yep.
record. Like, it should be a different version of the game, because the one player who's pretty good at dribbling and shooting has a little longer leash, and they're getting more creative expression. And then everybody else is just kind of running around chasing the other person with the wristband. But as you keep going up through the levels, you still see that. You see the good players, they're given more freedom by the coach, but there's not the same, like, hey, we want, there's not the same framework given to the other players for their own improvement. And I know, I mean, that was certainly me. And I think about, it's funny. I think about things that have just natural things that have a lot of degrees of freedom to them. One thing that comes to mind is just roughhousing, just like wrestling with my kids, because that's the thing where it's not win or lose. Well, sometimes I'll let them, if they can get me down for 3 seconds, they pin me and win. But it's always kind of like professional wrestling. It's just it's kind of a big act. But if you're just wrestling and messing around, and you can try different things. Oh, I'll try this to see if I can pin dad. I'll try this to see if I can pin dad. And it's just fun. And you're never like out of flow state, basically. And then it's interesting to think, okay, how soon into sport do I get out of that flow state? Because it's just, the game is too complex. It's too complex where I can't express degrees of freedom. I can't be creative. I can't make mistakes. And when does it start to go downhill? And that's why I do like, and I've talked with a few coaches about this. I think I was talked about when Rhett Larson was on, John Stea, who talks a lot about philosophy, but it's almost as if, because sport has gotten so crazy with specialization and that lack of freedom, that I think in a lot of physical preparation in gyms, this counterculture has come up where it's like the games are almost there to still keep that. So we can
Yeah.
still feel that. I mean, there's not going to be the tactical specificity, but I think that's encouraged and stoked that. It's nice to at least see that um, being repeated in a gym in a general setting.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, yeah, I mean, being in the private sector for that almost decade and
Mm.
seeing, middle school kids and high school kids with some of the schedules they had and the strictness of what parents, what AU programs and club teams that they did. It's just like, they're 12.
Mm.
They need some fun and
Yeah.
unstructured time and to be a kid. But and going back to that point, like as we go in our small group crossovers, when we go 1-on-1 too, like we call them sparring sessions. And so, like in boxing, like when you sparring somebody in whatever sort of combat endeavor that you're in, like a sparring session isn't to knock out or tap out the opponent. It's an interaction. Um, to show and try new things with a partner like that. So we
Yeah.
call them sparring sessions. So those guys understand like the goal of these things is not to make your partner feel good, but to show them new things, different things, to challenge them, to be disruptors. And again, it's a safe environment where if you do something that's a little new or you try to explore something, you're not going to get like in boxing or combat, you're not going to get knocked out or tapped out. So you're not going to get
Yeah.
injured. So same thing, like if you try something new and you lose a repetition, that's move on. Like again, there's no winning or losing. It's just, there's just learning. And so we call them sparring sessions. And again, that's kind of going back to like, I think language is important. If this is something that you're like for me, I'm bought into this. I'm all in this. Like, I try to call them sparring sessions for our guys so they understand like it's a back and forth. is to try to show and teach each other different things. Again, it's not about winning and losing. It's about you trying to stretch and demonstrate skill in new and multiple ways. And so that's why we call them like sparring sessions. Yeah, I think that's a good term. I think I got that from Sean.
Cool. Yeah, it does strike me that that most core basic thing is that one-on-one like roughhousing contact.
Yeah,
And
right. Yep.
I like I think it was at Rafe Kelly's seminar. It was like they were talking about like how can you treating that session to not just get better yourself, but also can I make my partner better? Or in just the spirit of just play, is my partner having fun too? And maybe you scale down the competition and win or lose. There's also like, hey, can we both have fun, or can we both make each other better doing this? And it's not just me trying to beat you. I mean, obviously I'm competitive and I do want to win, but to
Yep. Yeah.
kind of cut through those layers where you can also just get a more comprehensive, you can explore more and learn more movements. And just back to like, wrestling with my kids. They're going to try everything to try to beat me, and giving them that opportunity.
Yeah, and that's like you talk about the one-on-one basketball you used to play, and the woman that would just, you would think you got a beat on the move, and she'd
Oh yeah.
show you that, hey, I got a counter. Like,
Oh
she's
yeah.
one step ahead, and like, so I think it's a safe environment that, like, that's where I think learning happens. Okay, so I know this. You did it yourself. Okay, I got a beat on what her go-to move is. But then she was prepared for you to cut that off and recognize that, and she adapted and adjusted. And that's the beautiful thing about those smaller environments. And when they're safe and you're allowed to create and explore and fail in those settings, I think that's where those interactions happen. And that's where, like, as a team, we encourage a lot of like cross communication. So I love it. I think players at the end of the day are they're going to be each other's best coaches. So as they walk back in the line, like the offensive, the defensive guy are talking to each other about what they felt and did there. Why'd you do that? What'd you see? I think that's much more than a coach just trying to always,
Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely.
always give an input, always give a cue on this one, always give some feedback. Like let there be some quiet space and let the athletes marinate in that, and let opportunities for those guys to have those rich discussions with each other.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Is I think, along the lines of that, like overarching, the zeitgeist, that the status quo is the perfect practice. You make a mistake, you get yelled at. It's also the coach dictating, and it's not ever the athletes. Hey, you get in a group and you guys talk about the solution. You talk about what you could do better. Not, let's take a break from me doing this. And someone had said that rugby was a sport actually where it was a lot more captain driven than coach driven, which I found interesting. That kind of dynamic. So, um, yeah, great stuff. I know it's getting late, Michael. I just have one last question for you here,
Yeah.
and that is so. This could probably go a lot of ways, but off season. So off season in the spirit of the generalist or diversity, is there anything that you like your guys to do in the off season in particular? What do you think is a good off season for your group on the college level? Playing golf or pick up basketball or
Yep.
parkour? What would you, if you could have them do anything, or inspire, if they were inspired to do anything, is there any preferences that you would have for them?
Man, so like being a defensive coach and defense backs, I tell all my guys go play basketball. And I'm a basketball guy. I love basketball. I always wanted to play basketball, just wasn't good enough. I just saw in high school I was a better football player. Otherwise, I would have 100% chose basketball over it. Yeah, I always tell them basketball. We got like we'll do some things as a group, like some group activities, and so I take them bouldering. We went bouldering, and so I love bouldering. I think that's problem solving, it's strength, and movement and mobility in these unique, awkward positions. But basketball's a big one. I tell them do anything where they can guard somebody. Um,
Yeah.
go for it. And so I want them to play basketball. That's my biggest thing. Go play basketball. That's pretty much playing defensive back is playing basketball. So and then go do new things. Go rock climb. Go play volleyball. Do as many different things as you can.
Yeah. It's always cool to see like some of the top football players. You see them playing pickup and stuff like that. And the dunks especially, but the ones who are really skilled. It's awesome to see that crossover without question. Well,
There you
hey,
go.
Michael, thank you so much for this conversation. I love doing these talks that really expand my mind. I think about it's the classical 5 S's of performance, like stamina, strength, suppleness, and skills in there. But how often do people, it usually is just, oh yeah, be skilled at your sport. So I'm glad we could cut into the layers of that. And I really appreciate your insight, man. Awesome talking to you today.
Anytime, Joe. Appreciate it, man.